We're official live.
We're officially live. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Yeah,
My name,
everything's officially on the record. Now we have to behave.
yep. And for people who are new, my name's Hank. I'm the Sonic Shaman, and here's Melissa with Goddess Elite, and we're here to talk about the tradition of Peruvian nature mysticism, the Pakokuna tradition. That we have the same teacher, Don Zane Curfman, who wrote the book Inka Mountain Magic, which I just remembered. I still haven't brought you the book you asked for, Melissa. I'm sorry.
Do you have time to like run home and grab it? Because
Maybe I might. Well, not right now. Like we're doing the live, but
obviously,
I should be able to get that to you. Yeah, I can do that probably.
got to get that shipped to California.
Well, latest tomorrow, but I think I can come back. Like I can go and come back because I'm only here till 5 today anyway.
Okay.
So,
so yeah, we have the same teacher, and we both have copies. Though right now you've got the actual autographed copies.
Oh, copies. I heard coffees at first. I was like, yeah, I do have my copy.
Oh yeah, and they got that too. Like second or third cup today. So
she's got the Halloween cup. I got Christmas. But as we move through this and we start talking about the tradition, questions, comments are so welcome. So please don't hesitate to ask what's on your mind, or even if it seems out of left field, we can probably relate almost any question back to the tradition because we've been studying this for coming up on a decade, I think, total from the time we started hosting Zane for classes till now. It's been just under a decade.
Yeah, I was going to say it's been a few years. I would almost have to go back and start looking through some of the previous pictures to try and count back by the way the store was set up and be like, oh, that was this time, but before this. And
yep, it was in the back right before. Well, because we hosted Zane for about a year or two before we did the first apprenticeship in 2016. So I want to say probably 2014-ish, 2015 was it. So, but welcome everyone. So we were going to talk today on what we would call the Teqse Apus. And Teqse is a word, it means like universal or cosmic or really big nature spirits. And those in this tradition are things like the earth and like the real big spirits. And then as you start to work with things, you kind of, the way that Zane had taught us initially, we start working with those and then we drill down and then we learn how to work with some of the more specialized spirits. And we will talk about those on different live streams, but today it's all about these big ones that you could walk away from today and know these spirits and maybe start developing your own relationship with them.
Yes, because when you first hear about it, it can seem overwhelming. You're like, oh my God, I'm supposed to connect with big energy, right? It's not really that overwhelming. Like once you start into the practice, a lot of people kind of do it automatically. When you like, oh, I love that area of the woods. I love that lake. That's because you're already connecting with it and you didn't realize you were. And kind of like in a different way for you. And that's absolutely okay. Putting out all the fun emotes, Sandy.
One thing, like we just had the retreat and one of the people who came in brand new, they knew nothing of the tradition. They just said, this sounds just what I'm looking for. And they just signed up out of the blue. And one of the things they said is like a lot of the things Zane was teaching, they had already done intuitively on their own. And some of this is just that we are supposed to be in tune with nature. We're supposed to have this relationship with the earth and this relationship with the sun. But it's kind of like, if you're walking through a busy mall, there's all kinds of people there. You have to take the time to talk to people or talk to these spirits and develop that relationship.
Sorry, just updating the description over on Twitch. It still reads that we're doing tarot readings, and that was last night.
No, well, I have my tarot deck. Actually, I have my Andean Oracle deck. We could maybe pull a card if that feels light in a little bit. But the main thing is in a sense, I believe that, you are the earth and we're like a microcosm of that macro and developing the relationship. And that's the first of the Teqse Apus is Pachamama. It's Mother Earth. And, she is where all the action is happening and developing that relationship in a way, like the relationship with yourself and the degree you do your shadow work, it's a reflection of how you're working with the mother in the more in-depth senses. Sacred remembering exactly.
What is kind of fun, I used to have my mesa set up at the store all the time, like over on the side where the employees kind of work. And there would be people who would kind of like work their way through kind of like the barricade that was, separate the sides, and they would just be drawn over to, my mesa. And 9 times out of 10, most people wanted to pick up the stones or the representations that I had of Pachamama. And they're like, this feels so good. How much is the stone? And I'm like, put that down. That is not for sale. I'm glad it works for you. That is a whole healing, and that you needed this, which is why you were drawn over here. But that is not for sale. But so many people like that, that is a good basic starting point. And in the tradition, most of us start. It's kind of like where you start is with Earth, Pachamama, that grounding. And I think in this today's day and age, we're so rushed, overworked, a million things going on. Just coming back to that center point and being grounded and working in with her is so healing in of itself. People forget to do that on a day-to-day.
Yeah, just going barefoot a little bit even really helps. I remember when Melissa had first bought the store, and it was still down at the old location down on closer to Fairview Park. I would come in from the bank and I would be so frazzled, and I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to sit down and do readings. And she had this one stone called an Earth Keeper, and it was, I have it at home. I have to have it for the next time we stream. And she said, here, hold this, and just puts it in my hands. And it was seconds that I just thought suddenly was like, felt fully embodied, and I was right as rain. And that's what, if you start doing this tradition and doing this, it's really a practice. And you find that stone that for you holds that medicine of Pachamama, and you start working with it. When you're having a bad day, you grab that stone, it is anchored with your connection to the mother, and it just brings you back almost instantly. And that's what all these little stones on the mesas really are. It's stones that you work with, that you're embodying and really infusing one particular anchoring of energy. And then as you're working with people, if they need a wind stone, if they need an earth stone, you hand them that, and the stone's doing all the work while maybe you're going and doing other things based on your intuition.
Because that's a fun little exercise, right, that we had to do. I think in the first tradition, or first round of the apprenticeship, I don't remember Zane having us do it the second or third time, where we actually had to spend time with each of our little sacred pieces that represented each element, and was like, go ask it its name. And the whole concept of everything is alive, including those little bitty rocks and pebbles, outside. So being drawn to one that wants to work with you, and if it wants to work with you on your mesa, which one is it going to represent for you? And it's happy to do that work. So you're not forcing them, or like, you will now do this. It's that little stone wants to do it. So, but just taking the time, ask your stones what their name is. And sometimes you can't even pronounce it. It's just, you have a sense of what that name is, but we do not have the context of being able to say it. As much as we humans like to think we are the greatest and the best, and we're the all-knowing, we're not really compared to other things. So
the mountains have been around a lot longer than us.
They got to the party a few minutes before we did. But working with those little stones and them doing that work while you're doing something else for your client or your loved one, who could be your client, they get double work.
I think Zane, he might have done that the first 2 years, and then he kind of changed how he was teaching, because there's a whole bunch of different types of mesas. Like there's the bundled mesas like me and Melissa have. There's ones that you never open, like this is a Kintu mesha. There's ones that you do open. It's called a humpback mesha, and that's like one that is, they call that the healer's mesa. And you open that up, and you let the people touch the stones. This one you never open up, but then you put this on a much bigger spread, and we will live stream with a whole spread set up eventually, so you can see like the full spread. And it's almost like the healer's mesas becomes the outer artes of where you put in your Kintu mesha. This is like a personal development piece, and you can do both. And that's the real beauty of, as you start to do this work, it's like, well, what are you really looking to do? Are you doing it for personal work? Are you doing this to help people? You could build one of the mesas, you could build both of the mesas, and it really is customizable to what you want to get, what you want to put in and get out of it.
I will say, like, this is probably my more favorite one because it's so mobile.
Yeah.
but and it can do a lot of work in of the self. And I'll clarify real quick. You do open this for you yourself in a cleansing, rejuvenating, not publicly or working with clients. It's the other ones. When we say you open it is when there's other people around. I'm sure like if myself and Hank and other students were all sitting around and we're like, hey, let's all get together on the next new moon, full moon, and let's all, revamp our Kintsugi. That's okay. Because I'm still only touching my stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to run
Well,
around and be
maybe.
like, I'm not touching it. So we might, but we're not actually going to without
Yeah.
any permission. Um,
Yeah. I know there was one story where, well, I know who, but I won't mention a name. They did end up opening their mesa in the presence of someone else, and they ended up getting really dizzy. And it was almost like the energy coming off of when that thing opened up. And there's like no radiation shield. I guess if you want to think of the cloth, like when it's bundled, it's kind of contained. And when she opened it, the person that she was working with and was visiting with got really dizzy, and then she bundled it and ended up grounding him and all that kind of thing. But it was a really good reminder that it's not just because it's a personal thing for you. It's also like those energies, like this particular one, it's like a personal development piece. And when you're opening it and you're only doing that for yourself, and all of a sudden you're doing it with someone that's not doesn't have the same relationship as you do with those energies, that might make people a little lightheaded or buzzy or something like that.
mm-hmm. And what's cool about the the program, like you start kind of working on this, but you don't build this in the first weekend. And the way Zane did it, it was like you're working around in the bigger mesa with all of the elements, and you're slowly building up to this because this represents your highest perfect self. And I remember Zane at one point saying, it doesn't matter how tired you are, grumpy you are, just out of it you are, this is always perfect because the energy and the training that you do in creating this, it is always perfect for what needs to be done. So that's like your highest perfect self in your healing rites and work. But we got a little off topic. So going back to the stones, there is a representation for each element inside of here, as well as the your big outer mesa as well. And it's the outer mesa stones that, if you wish, people can touch if you told them to hold it or place it on them. It's also that outer mesa. Hank, you've had yours big enough for people to actually lay in it.
Yep, I put up a massage table over it sometimes, and I've worked with people when it's like when they're across the mesa, and then I'll put the head, depending on what kind of healing it is, I'll position them differently. I really like doing like across the divine diagonal. Like if you're looking at, I'll pull up a picture maybe, and I can put one on screen. There's like the divine diagonal from upper left to lower right is the divine feminine, and then the other, and that's the one we're working with right now because the pendulum is swinging. We're healing toxic masculinity. The divine feminine is coming back to the forefront and helping to balance energies and things like that. So that's what we're all working with right now. And on that divine diagonal, like putting someone from left to right across that is just like an amazing position because of the way the energies are flowing. But you could do it so many different ways. And if you didn't have it large enough where people can be laid across it, you could just have them stand at certain corners. There was one class I remember that we needed to do a kuti ceremony, which is a reversal ceremony to send something back. Like think like if there was a magic thing thrown at you, or if you just had some bad luck or something going on. And a whole bunch of people in the class had that. And he had everybody stand in the corner of a mesa, and we did this whole ceremony processionally where the people who weren't being worked on were recapitulating the mesa all around them. Because Zane, after he realized what had happened, he had put the mesa together backwards. And he knew he was doing it wrong, but he was compelled to do it anyway. And then as that unfolded in the class, he realized we need to do this type of ceremony and to right the world, to put the world right around these people. The whole mesa was rebuilt with them standing, and the mesa was recreated around them, which is representative of the mesa is you. So in a sense, their whole world, Pachacuti means world turned upside down. Their world was being turned right side up. And that was one of my favorite experiences in class because it came out of nowhere, and it was just such a magical moment that everybody came together, and without anybody having ever done that ceremony before, they were able to be part of it and do this for the people who needed it.
Well, and I
Sorry,
remember
major tangent.
that particular like the night before, driving home, and it's funny because Zane was on the highway in front of me, and I forget where he was staying, but we were on like Route 20 heading west, and there had been like a shooting star, and I'm like, oh, then I'm like, did you see that? And he's like, no. And I'm like, oh, did you not? But, then here comes this big thing. And I'm like, oh, was that kind of like a precursor of like some shit's getting ready to go down? So we have started with Earth, Pachamama. There are layers and like mini Pachamamas, right? Pachamama's the big, like Earth herself, and then there's mini, if you want to call it. You have like your Pachamama of like, say, your house, the land around your house, like that's a separate little entity versus the big one. The entity like of your business. So like Hank's office, my store, working with them.
Yeah, that word is actually a Pachamamita, is like spirit of the land. So your address would be one, your business would be one, any park, anything like that would be its own separate little energy of that particular space.
Mm-hmm. Feel free to ask questions, guys, because we're kind of just throwing out info and seeing if you have questions. So what do we want to move over to what would be water?
We can't. One thing on a Pachamamita, there was I shouldn't say names. I remember who it is, but like somebody who's done classes through the store and everything before, they were selling their house and they were having a hard time selling it. And when we tuned into the spirit of the land, the house was like sad. The spirit of the land was sad to see them go. And he ended up, I gave him instructions on how to build a despacho to honor the land. And he honored the land. He did little Kintu despachos, and that could be a whole separate stream. And he buried it on the property and basically told the spirit of the land, hey, you're going to find someone that's just fine for, taking care of you. And then within a week, the house sold. Now, does it always work that well? Not 100%. I know Melissa has had issues selling her house and was trying to make peace with her Pachamamita for a while. But when you recognize that you're developing relationships with the entity that is your home and the land, it really can open the door for that home doing things for you that you might not have considered, or you knowing you need to do things for your home.
Look who's here.
Look. Hey.
How does working with Pachamama help you in your life? Oh, it's going to help you stay grounded.
Especially if you're a space cadet.
Like I said a little earlier, like when people were drawn to my mesa in the store and kind of wiggling back there to get to it, and always the first one, I think there was like one time that it wasn't the Pachamama area that people were drawn to and just wanted to stand there and like either hold the stone or just stand at that area of the table. Because it is a calming, it's grounding. It's like this collective of coming back into this present moment of where you're standing. Before you can, before you should maybe start reaching back out. It's like being centered here and knowing where you are, and this is your placement right now. And then you start branching out. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, hey, Mary's another one who has gone through some of the trainings, not some, pretty much, I think all of them since we've started.
She has been in, I think, everything since the beginning, every single time we have a run, and it's different every single time.
It is. And I think Mary can also vouch for that. And that's why I always love sitting in, especially the in-persons, because it's a different type of energy, but it's always different and there's always new info. I still need to sit down and get I call it like my Zane book bag of like all of the notes, like regathered and structured, because there's always these side notes going on of like aha moments. Like we didn't cover that last time, but that correlates into this over here and how to work that, a different way of doing it. So like, Hank, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, well, it's really being present with yourself, working with the mother, because like I said, like in a way, you are the earth. It's kind of like you are one drop of the ocean. Like we're all from dust to dust, ashes to ashes. And when you start working with Pachamama, you cannot help but to develop a much deeper relationship with oneself and a love for oneself. And there's nothing that she can't handle. When you go and you're starting to connect with that macro version and that Teqse Apu, that Pachamama, there's nothing that she can't handle. If you are really heavy and you don't know how to move that energy, your relationship with Pachamama is going to enable you to more easily let that go and give it to her to mulch and cultivate and to recapitulate, so that then it's going to become, blessings for for your life and things like that, and
And,
grounding.
and the comfort knowing that like you cannot release to her anything that's going to harm her.
Right.
Like there's nothing you can do energetic wise that you're going to cause her damage by giving that over. Um, Listening to you guys and your interpretation of the classes is helpful, even though I've been there, right? And sometimes having that other perception. There's been times where other students who have sat in the same class, like maybe they were 2 spots away from me or 2 spots from like listening to it, but then would kind of reach out later and be like, "Can you rephrase that?" Or "I'm having trouble. Can you explain it differently?" Because we all learn differently. We all take in the information differently. And that's why we try to be as available as we can, the 3 of us, and sometimes other Maria. She's good at breaking it down too, sometimes for other people. So absolutely. All right. Yeah, Kate, sending in questions, not just from our teacher that we have to be on for.
And Zane, feel free if you have an answer to that yourself, like if you were to tell somebody what is the greatest thing that they could get from working with Pachamama, like we'd be honored to have your comment too. No pressure now, just throwing the volley back there. Yeah. But and then from that, all other things. She's like the hub for all the other spirits in a way, like the Pachamamita, like all that's happening here. Even the sun, though that's off in space, the sun and how it relates to the earth, she's somewhat of the hub of connecting with all these other spirits. So you start with Pachamama, and then as we're going to walk around and go through the rest of the Teqse Apus, that's all happening here, and it's all how it relates to here. The sun landing on a different planet doesn't matter to us. Like, how does the sun impact our relationship with the mother, and then how all life can occur from that? So it's really instrumental for building the relationship with all the other spirit beings.
Mm-hmm. So she is normally represented in like the south position. So your bottom, your south. And I guess a little side note, when you set your mesa up, it should face towards water and towards east, I believe it is, if I remember correctly. Yes, east.
There's a lot of there's different points of view of how you have to set it up. Yeah, I think one time I heard Zane say, and Zane could confirm or deny this, or sometimes you set it up just based on the energy and like what needs to happen, but also like the feathers facing north, or sometimes the feathers towards the door. Depending on what you're feeling, you might be getting into, it might be relevant to put the mesa in a different direction, even though it might not be intuitive or traditional. And to your point, you said it's usually in the south. There are some tribes and things that will put the ocean in the south. They put the water in the south because they're right on the coast, and that's more part of their world than the mountains and things. So they might start with Mama Kocha or Mama Unu in the south, and then have Pachamama in the west, for example.
Brooke asks, are there any specific stones that are sacred in this practice? All of them is an appropriate answer. Pretty much all of them. So here's the fun thing about this practice. While I have a store that sells a lot of stones, most of us, our stones that are in our mesas are a lot of stuff we pick up outside. So you can use, shiny, tumble, pretty stones, but a lot of my working are a mixture of both things that I've picked up walking around, just kind of getting into that mind space of, I'm like, my Waira stone says he wants a vacation. So what's a new stone for wind? So, and it might take a couple walks, going around and finding where that calling is exactly coming from, because it's big outside, right? So finding that, but that's one part that I love about this. Like, it's not like you have to have like an enormous amount of money to turn around and like do this tradition. Like, what's out in your front yard is going to work just fine for you.
Yeah, the one, like, because I think everything is sacred. Also, there's 2 stones that I feel, if you can get them from where you're born, they're like, this is kind of going not on the main stones, but very important. There's a pacarina, which is the feminine nature spirit of your place of emergence, and your Teqse Apu, and they're representative of where you were born. And if you can get to where you were born and look for stones that represent that masculine and feminine energy of your birthplace, that would be relevant because you kind of get the morphic field imprint, if you will, of your birthplace. And I think that that as I've worked through the tradition for all these years, that those two stones are perhaps the ones that I actively use the most, because they end up being the holders of the manual for you to ascend and rediscover yourself without getting too much into it. So like but all the stones have their own medicine and magic. But those two come out to me to talk about that. If you're listening to the stream and you're close to where you're born, maybe see if you find two stones that really sing to you, that might, if you're going to be getting into this, you might want to pick up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like agates from where you're born would be perfect.
Yeah.
Karen's like, Gaia is this similar as far as adoration and reverence. Mm-hmm. This is an instance, I believe, of like same entity being different name, right? So, you know, people might know me as the store owner. Rue knows me as his annoying mom, colleague to Hank. Same person, but different like titles.
Different hats.
Yeah. Let's see if I missed any other. So Mary was like, yes, grounding is what I have received. Needed this since no planets in the Earth area of her chart.
Very good.
Let's see. Are we ready to move on to?
I think so.
Sophia.
We're going to move on to Sophia. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's a rabbit hole that takes me way. I haven't been down that rabbit hole in a little while, and I probably need to revisit that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that rabbit hole. We could do that as a separate stream, and you can educate me.
It's part of the reason why there's blue in my Kintu.
Oh, cool.
Why it changed from a Nightmare Before Christmas fabric, because you can do that, to a blue.
See, and I like the rainbow. When I put this down with the divine diagonal, Quichi is along that as well, and I have the rainbow right along. So like you can personalize it and add extra little meaningful things. Like she has one for Sophia apparently.
All right, so keep asking questions, guys. We're going to kind of move over into the water, which for most is going to be west, and that's going to align in a way for a lot of pagan traditions as well. Other pagan traditions, I should say. And it's the second one that would be called in opening. Making sure we didn't miss anything. Nope, looks like we're good. So, Hank, the names for water.
So you have Mama Unu, which is water, and then Mama Kocha, which means ocean or could mean lake or, a body of water. Mm-hmm. And then often with the water, we also call in the moon, which is Mama Kia. And I think that the association with water and the tides, it's really fitting that we include the moon in the conversation for that. And I kind of also, on a more cosmic level, look at it as the waters of creation. That is not necessarily traditional, but I always think of that as well. It's not just the waters of our planet. We have like the unseen waters of creation. And I like the saying that, well, I don't know if it's saying this tradition, but I like saying you surf the waves of creation to your destination, because it's kind of like you're riding these energy waves of what's out there in the day-to-day world. So anyway, but your question, Mama Unu, Mama Kocha, Mama Kia are the three Quechua words for water, ocean, and moon.
And the color most associated with water is actually black, and earth, Mama Pachamama, red, like a mud clay red. And then we get into black. And, some people are like, why black, right? Because the deepest part of water, when you're down there, it's dark, it's black, you can't see. So it's that area where this is also your emotion side. So all that stuff you're stuffing and you don't want to deal with lives down there. So that deep dark of water, the surface, it's nice, it's bright, it's sunny, it's the beach, yay, fine. But if you get down in there, what's lying underneath? This is where you're going to also start pulling out stuff that you've been avoiding, that you've been working with, or kind of like hidden talents kind of down in there as well. So so we have the red, like clay earth color for Pachamama. Then you've got black for the deep, big waters. So that creation water, all that stuff, we crawled out of the water, right? According to science, we came up out of that black water, started making a home on land.
Yeah, and the thing with water too in this tradition, it is because it goes into the deepest depths of Pachamama. So like when you are at a calm lake or anything like that, we use that to connect with like the underworld and being able to drain our hucha and bubble. Hucha means heaviness, and it's like a way to connect really deeply with Pachamama. So those two really go hand in hand. And it's almost you develop them. I mean, they're separate, but at the same time, you're developing together because the water is just another aspect of Earth.
Mm-hmm. So again, water, kind of like Pachamama, you got the big, the oversensing or the overreaching, like water of all of Earth, and then you've got those mini, like your Lake Erie water spirits, Superior, Mississippi River. They all are separate little water mamas.
Mm-hmm.
So working with them. So if you've got one near you, even that little lake on your property, or a couple houses down, that is its own little like conscious being. So working with them.
And there's something to be said that if a body of water or mountain is well known, we call those suyu, like apus, or suyu nustas. And it means that it's a nature spirit that people come from all over the world to see. And the way I look at it is you have all these people that have been to all these places going to this one centralized spot. And whenever we do work as Pacos, we're doing these exercises where we're like putting an acupuncture needle in the space that we go to. And so when you have people who are doing this type of work intentionally putting this little connection there, and they have connected to all these other things, it creates, if you imagine like all these CK lines, these energy lines coming to one spot, Suyu Nustas, Suyu Apus, they have the ability to be a place where you can connect to other energies that maybe you will never physically be at. So I kind of look at them as like these amazing little energetic relay stations that you can, as you develop your relationship with, what else is possible? What other spirits can you connect with?
Mm-hmm. Good question. What about man-made water areas?
I would say that it still will be. It might not be as old as some of the other spirits, but you're creating a body of water. It's like a new birth, new stuff. I would look at it as it just like we have our houses, right? Like that is an arbitrary, made up boundary line. Yet your house has its own energy, its own spirit. And I would look at the creation of a man-made park with a man-made lake the same way. It maybe just is a baby, but it doesn't mean that it's not its own energy spirit.
Well, and that water is still an ancient element from Earth. Like we can't just pull water out of nothing. There's water in the air all the time. So you're just pulling that down. And science will say the water in the air could have evaporated off of a bigger, older lake, so many miles down the road that happened to be pulled in and created. And that land that's creating the crater, that water is still there, is still old, is still that ancient knowledge. So the idea and the perception that it's new is still, I think, accurate, but at the same time, there's still some underlying ancient knowledge that is still there. Now it's just presenting in a new way. Because no matter what we as humans do to this earth, like that ancient knowledge of this whole planet is still there. We just keep moving it around and deciding what we're going to do with her. So, let's see. Where did the idea to dig the ponds come from?
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, but if I had to imagine an answer, I would say it's related to some sort of agricultural and caring for plants. But I really don't know.
Yeah.
Or to make a moat around a castle so people can't get in.
Like, was that a platformist? I mean, was I there but not there? Like off in Lala? Because I don't remember that one. But usually agriculture or protection.
Pachamama's dreaming. There we go. Well, and that in the sense that we are the earth, like they look at, the Pacos would look at anything, like even gasoline or a gasoline container, plastic stuff, all of that is of the earth. It's because of the mother that was possible. So even man-inspired things, they would still look at as natural. And so I think that's an important consideration, because everything that's on this planet has been given to us from Pachamama, has been given to us from the universe. And we're, through, like Zane said, Pachamama's dreaming, coming up with new things that allow us to have different relationships and different experiences. So it's all in that sense natural.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, keep asking questions. All good questions coming through. So even if you're thinking of putting a little retention pond in your garden, like you're creating a new little
baby Musta. Oh, it's so cute.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you might start treating your little gardening pond a little bit differently now.
Yeah.
Let's see. I mean, after sitting through this tradition, I treated my yard and my gardening completely different. Like I enjoyed it before, it was relaxing, I looked forward to it, but then there was a whole sacredness that came through taking care of the land after that point. And just even sitting outside for a bonfire, like had a whole new meetings. Now you're spending extra time and you are privileged to be able to sit there and do that, right? So yeah, you've got your land, you've got your maybe Wyra on a fall evening, and now you've got, Inti, fire brewing around. So treating your yard maybe now is going to be a little different, even when you're watering your plants. Let's see. All right. Are we ready to move into wind? Looking at our
Why
time?
not? Yeah, especially looking at our time, because we wanted to get through all of them in one shot.
Yep.
But then we start talking and going on tangents. So the next one is wind, which is Wyra.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a bluish energy. Like, well, we can talk about energy centers a different time, but it's related to like the color of silver and blue. And often it's a combination of the moon and the wind that are creating that color.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a inspirations, and there's different types of wind, just like we talked about. There's like, yeah, Pachamama, and then you have all these sub entities, and you have the water, and you have all these sub entities. Wind is the same. You have the wind, Taiwantan White are the four winds, but you also have like the sacred wind and the healing wind, and all kinds of different things. But I look at it as like the energy, the inspirations of how things are whispered to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ability to move things that maybe aren't actualized in your film. That's not the word I want, but like things that are, especially if you're an empath, the wind could be a great tool to help whisk away things that aren't really yours, or some of the other energy practices that we use, like the Samajakui, Father's Rain, which we'll talk about on a different stream. Like there's all these different things that can start to shift and get move energies that aren't going to serve you. I start going on a tangent, so save me.
Reel it back in. Reel it back in.
I really get back in. I'm stopping talking and letting you talk
now. So on your bigger mesa, right? That's your feather for wind, because what more appropriate than a symbol with feathers and birds that fly naturally up there? They're in natural correspondence. And again, you don't have to go buy some big fancy feather, something that you find out in the yard. Perfectly fine. Now there were a few students first or second year, they were like, well, why do we need a rock for wind? Wind is ground, or rocks are down low. And I'm like, but yet that mountain is one big giant rock and it's way the heck up there getting a lot of wind, right? So that little stone can also correlate the wind, and the wind will brush over stones laying on the ground. So making that connection of below and above and bringing that together and having that representation down on your level that you can work with and that you're comfortable with, which is why picking your own pieces is so detrimental for your working place. Don't have somebody go pick it for you. Zane has a fun story about picking out his pieces and his teacher giving him grief. One of my favorites. Speaking of Zane, we need to get you on a couple of these, I think. We were going to throw you in. Surprise.
Well, I messaged them the other day about it. I said, we're going to be doing these, and however often you want to feel like you want to hop on, then you can always just, if you're in a place to stream, Zane, and you see us on, you can always just say, hey, shoot me a link, and we will send you a link, and you can hop on anytime.
Yep.
When it comes to the windstone, what I found is I was at the Baltic Sea in Europe, and there's all these stones that have had a hole made through them. And so you can blow through it. So like, I just thought that's kind of a cool wider stone. And then of course, I have that down, and then the feather can go in there, and then my feather is being held by my wind stone. And until before I found that, I just had a piece of brick that I found at the beach. Actually, I think I got it from you. You had found it, and it had like 3 holes. Yeah, it was a heart-shaped brick piece. And then at the time, I had 3 feathers, and it was like 1 feather for each world, because all the worlds are within each other. That could be a different stream, but it was just a perfect piece to have all the feathers like laid out, and it's just amazing. And that's the thing, like every single stone, everything that you'll end up having on your mesa has its own story, has its own unique vibration. And then if someone comes in, hey, what like when I did the healing clinic, people would come in and I say, look at everything that's set up and just pick 2 or 3 things that most call to you. And based on what they picked, I came up with a whole healing around it, just based on the energies that they were led to, and then customized it. And it was a beautiful thing, but it's so fun and personable.
Well, and what they pick off them is usually what they're needing, right?
Yeah.
That's because it's what they need. And that area of your mesa and those stones associated with it are already kind of doing some of that work and are volunteering. So, I've done that where I'm like, yeah, what is it that you are drawn to? And that's what we're going to start.
If you're doing a whole bunch of them in a row, sometimes it's interesting. You see the same people, there'll be a continuity. So everybody's picking some different ones, but like at the clinic, every person picked a bow, every single one. And that was just kind of interesting. Out of like 30 items, everybody picks one of the same item, and then different individual ones.
Well, you know what? Tell work that they need a shush for a few more minutes when it's done, because then we got to get to work too. So wind, I think, is one of my favorites. It's fun to say. Waira. There we go. Words are hard. Need to finish the coffee. And like it's one of the ones. It's funny. I love all of them equally, but it's Waira and Inti that tend to be my favorite, especially, and it's funny, especially Inti, because with certain medical issues I have, Inti is the most dangerous to me. Just being outside in the sun is a problem. But yet when I call in, those 2 areas are the happiest for me. So it's like from this loving area, and I love the whole thing. But I get to Inti, and it's almost like the little kid of like, yay, Inti area. Don't hurt me. Yay.
Well, Neto, maybe it's time to move over to Inti. That is the sun. That's what she's talking about. And it is funny that from the very first time I met you, I remember one of our first events, like you were like dying outside. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But that's the one you're most drawn to. It's very ironic.
Yeah. I'm like, really? Thanks. The irony.
And the sun kind of goes along with the moon too, because like if you're trying to illuminate shadow, you call in the moon. You don't want to make it come up too fast, but like the power of the sun to break up hucha, to like just break it down, break it up, move it on. It's such a powerful energy to work with. And it's another one you want to develop the relationship with it, but as Melissa has learned too, you also have to respect it and keep yourself safe with it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, next obviously is Inti, the sun. And just a quick little hint, like there is parts in this tradition where not only do we honor and work with the sun that we see, the big ball of fire up in the sky, but also those black holes, those collapsed suns. So I'm like, those are my friends. They're nicer to me. But into the sun, and then the sacred little fires that you can use in rituals, and the heat, and all of those mini versions of the big overreaching Inti Taita. So so you do your circle. Hank, what's your favorite part about Inti? And don't you say getting a tan, because
no. Wait, don't say what? I missed what you said.
Don't say getting a tan, because then I'm jealous.
Oh, well, I do like getting tans for sure. Like the illuminating powers of it. But then there's also like there's Inti Taita, which is Father Sun, like the sun of our solar system. But we also have the Teqse Apu, which is like the Ovum, the galactic sun, like the center of the universe. And there's as you go deeper in the tradition, there's all this whole other body of work to do with that. So like the sun is like the tip of the iceberg in a sense, kind of pun intended, hot and ice. But then there's like this whole deepening that you go through when you start working with some of these other energies. So like that cosmic sun is like my jam. I really like it.
When we first got into the Inti area, I remember thinking, and it was before we went outside and at night and connected with that central. But I remember thinking like, if this one's the creation and this and that, I'm like, what with the black hole? And so when he touched on that, I'm like, yes, using this dark sun to pull in, destroy, recapture, and then those white, holes that spew out the creation. And, so working around in the different parts in mini versions, it gives different ways of being able to help yourself or the people that you're working with. So, if you're needing to remove or in a way destroy something for them, but maybe instead of it feeling like a water of like drowning or washing away, maybe it needs to be burned and, compressed and built anew. So there's different points around the mesa to give you tools for working on what you need. And I think Inti in a way is almost one of the, like, we have the three others, right? You have your big ones and we start working with smaller, but I think Inti is almost the reverse. We're so used to having that small little bit of a fire. And then that one's almost, at least for me, something that we go in the reverse. We start small, we go big, whereas everything else is like big. And then we start paying attention to small. So just my thought. But
I like that thought.
Sorry.
What happened?
Thunderstorm still going out of nowhere. Yay. Warn me next time. I wasn't trying to drink coffee right then. That would be bad.
Para. Zane gave us the word for rain and snow. I always forget that. Para is rain.
Yeah.
Where was that? Anyway, it's fun.
Yeah.
I don't see Melissa scared often, so it's kind of fun when I see it.
Like that was, it sounded so right outside my parking lot is like our trash dumpster, like 20, 30 feet out. And it was loud enough that it sounded like a truck just drove into like the garage or the big metal dumpster. Like it was that close and loud. Right. We're not scared.
Right. Give me my moment. All right. Like I want to savor this.
But we've got a few more. Yeah, me too. Burn and peel. Yeah. Right. So the thunder I heard too. Thank you. Not just me. So we'll touch a little bit about Koichi, because that is almost like an extra, I wouldn't say he's an element, but he is the joining force of all of those.
Yeah, it's like the divine diagonal coming down from the bottom, where we would put our Inka embodiment piece, and we can talk about that at a different time. The rainbow goes up the divine diagonal. So I almost look at the whole mesa. If you've been paying attention, we started with the solid, then we moved to a liquid, move to a gas, and we move to like plasma, and then we are transcending energy. So in a way, I look at it as ways to elevate energies to the next octave through this element of Koichi. And though this is not traditional, I look at it also like or I guess Koichi Katari, that would be like your unique voice in this world. It is like, in a way, your uniqueness is how you are taking all these things and creating something new and more elevated with it. And so Koichi is like perhaps one of the more important ones too. And if you think of yourself as a prism, that rainbow that's coming through the prism of your ego and the prism of your past experiences, it is that you're working with to create something new and elevate from the reality around you.
So we have our fun little rainbow snake in the center that connects everything and moves everything and kind of helps, if needed, helps you shift from where you need to be for yourself or whoever you're working with of moving through. There have been some people that are like, I don't like snakes. And I'm like, wow, this one's not going to bite you. Yeah, Koichi Katari. Thank you, Zane. He's rather.
I always spell it with a Q. I misspell it all the time. Like, Chris, there's no correct spelling of Quechua. So that's my saving grace. It doesn't matter if I know how to spell anything.
Oh, see, I hear the thunder over there, right down there. It's hitting here because I'm like 1.5 miles away. So science. But But Koichi, like I said, he's an element, not an element. He's just he's a sentient, helpful being that's a part of your mesa to help you move around and work. And I've had conversations with him sometimes of just sitting there, and I'm just like, all right, what is the important part today that I need to pay attention, because I'm too monkey minded with everything else going on. And like sometimes he'll like actually rise up. He'll kind of move over and be like, over here. Okay, let's go see what that area has to teach me today. Yeah, you know what? There's not really spiders unless Zane's just not let us in on that secret so many years down the road. We've dealt with what pumas and condors, hummingbirds, got our serpents.
Yeah. And that would be a whole separate stream on what we just did today. We could build and put the mothers of creation on top of all that, because each one of these correlates with a different animal, and each animal correlates with a different energy and how you use that energy. So like things really, you're getting all these tools that stand on their own, but then the way you can piece them together and combine them with techniques like tracking with a rattle, and it just evolves in a way that's very intuitive as you start to collect the information and put the pieces together in the way that works best for you.
Mm-hmm. So if you have any questions, we're kind of wrapping up.
Whoa, the Teqse Apu. Ooh, the cosmic web. Is this a rhetorical question, Zane? Do you know the answer?
Oh, I think the teacher's Puklei.
Puklei, Wakuchai. Teqse Maru, I like that. Muyu. Muhu Koya. That's like seed of potential. Yeah, so the web of potential, would that be the cosmic web of potential? Is that what you're saying? That would be, maybe it's all us. It's the cosmic versions of us, like making the little CK lines through space, making this web of energetic connection. Mm-hmm. As we evolve as species, humanity, and as a universal type thing, we are the weavers of the dream.
Well, I mean, in most traditions, spiders are revered, their wisdom, their fate, their knowledge, their the connectedness, they're not as scary. So, yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm like, I can't think of one, at least that I know of. I do not know everything, but spiders are not like, oh, you need to be aware of and like keep an eye out for that. It's usually like sometimes foxes and other animals and other traditions that like, oh, those are the sneaky sly ones. Be careful with those. Haven't really seen that with spiders. Even Anansi, like, he was a good guy. But yeah, guys, ask last few questions. We'll be wrapping up here soon to get the day started at the store. Yeah. They are.
Yeah.
Right.
And after
you hear it by Hank first because he's up the road from me, and then it like within a few seconds it hits here.
Yeah.
So
you get a double time.
Yeah, like saying, what's the Quechua word for thunder?
I don't know the Quechua word for thunder either. I hope there's when he redoes his book, I hope he includes a much more robust. I don't, I should have had the books with me. I even grabbed it the other day because I would like, as we planned these streams, I wanted to go based on his book and kind of use that as a guide for our conversations. And then I grabbed the book, put it by my nightstand, and I didn't read it.
Forgot.
Again. Yeah, I forgot.
It's a very, like I've kind of mentioned before. I don't know if you got to hear me say it because I say it a lot. Everything that I've trained in, like this is the one that I can use on a daily basis, and it doesn't feel like work. Yeah, I don't think we've ever learned that word before because I do not.
Lipa.
It does not sound fascinating.
So when we have Zane on, we'll have to get him to pronounce all these correctly for us because was that Lipa? Lipa? Anyway.
Phonetic spelling, please. So this is going to start spring next year, and I think it's going to be the hybrid. And I say I think because it's being restructured. We've had so much interest from everywhere. So there will be some in person. There's going to be online options for like coming up for the big pieces. Oh, no thunder and independence. Well,
Yeah.
All the cool kids are here with the thunder.
Yeah.
Well,
And I'm
we're
sure that, and what Melissa's referring to is going to be a more like when we first started with Zane, Zane designed like 7 weekends where we would have nature trips and then mesa work. And it's going to be something like that plus like an online component. And that's going to start in the spring. But it's our hope that we get Zane in the store to do like a 1 day or 2 day like class so people can kind of get a vibe for Zane in person. Because once you do, like you'll be like me and you'll be like you'll be addicted, and because there's so much beyond the tradition that Zane has just this well-rounded plethora, a smorgasbord of knowledge from so many different places that he just weaves together so effortlessly. It's really amazing. Ooh, it means spark. I thought spark. No, that's like first ray. Anyway, is that Ia? Is that what? Is that how you spell it? I never knew how to spell it. Like, Ia, Inti, Hatan Sonko, first ray from the sun or spark from the sun, illuminate the great and beautiful heart, for example. Is that Ia? Am I using it right?
Is it the same one? We do have the book available, Zane's book at the store. And we're going to try and coordinate with Zane about having him come up and do like a intro or come meet the guy. So if you want books autographed or personalized, we could do that too. And I want to say on the store's YouTube, you can go back and watch like he and I talking more on the tradition from before. So if you want more knowledge even before next Thursday, because we are looking to do these every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can go back and watch those ones, get some questions ready. But yeah, I think we need to wrap it on up. So I think you have a few clients like not long after the start of the day, and I actually need to get down the road to where you are. There we go. It's reversed.
Yeah. And if you're interested in just a taste of it in action, when I do my like tonight, I have a sound concert plus breath work ceremony out of my office in Westlake. If you wanted to, you can message me. I can give you things where I'm going to be doing things, and I'll also be doing some intro classes, just to kind of give that information out and like really determine. Like I knew from my first Pachamama that I was home with it. And there was no question. And I think that when you have the experience of it in action, you will have that knowing too, and then can choose like how far down the shaman hole, the rabbit hole, the Paco hole you want to go.
Well, and it's funny because I was going to say to you, maybe one of these streams, we should do a possible kind of showing maybe like some of the items, maybe not everything, but the whole point being, I know, like, maybe I would be okay with mine. I'm okay with that. But, the very first weekend that we had with Zane and all of this, he gave us at the end of the weekend our first little stone that we had to keep track of that ultimately goes in here. And I remember thinking that the shape of the stone, and it doesn't really work anymore because of the multiple repetitive surgeries, but at that time in the scarring up here, one of those stones was the perfect shape and outline that I had. I'm like, oh,
very cool. That's so cool.
So now not as much. Maybe that means I need to go change my stone as I'm looking. But like that was a lock. And I'm like, how did he know?
Very cool.
And so yeah, we ready to.
Yep, we're ready to wrap up. Zane was just saying, appreciate you both. A Nike Kuwaiki, Wakuchai. Thank you. We love you, soul brother. You're welcome. And we will catch you next week.
Email questions between now and then, or write them down, have them ready for next week, and we'll go through them.
Yep. And we'll figure out our topic hopefully sooner this time and get the stream scheduled so you know what we're going to talk about. But as you can see, we could easily go off on tangents. We learn from the best tangent maker there is, Mr. Don Zane Curfman.
People ask questions, and then he's like, yes. And so there's a lot of knowledge in him. So, but thank you guys for joining, and joining us next week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on all of the things. We're like on 8 platforms doing this. So if you know anybody that would be interested, tell them to come ask questions and listen.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Bye, guys.